Hey, welcome to Comic Artist Pro Secrets live. This is kind of a surprise thing. I warned you guys about this briefly, but I wasn't sure we were going to be able to pull it all together. We were able to pull it all together. I have a very special guest here today with me. He is a magnificent author, novelist, crime novelist, my favorite kind of fiction, and also a wonderful comic book artist, or writer. I'm sorry, writer. So we're going to actually introduce you to Gregg Hurwitz right now. Say hello, Gregg.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Ethan Van Badass, good to see you as always.
Oh, it's good to see you too. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the chat here on my other iPad, and let's see what people are saying. We already have people showing up for this. This is pretty great. I should be more
art on display in the background here.
I love that. So basically, Gregg and I know each other from our work together on Batman: The Dark Knight. All right, let me turn this down. It's muted. Magnificent. All right, hello everyone. Yeah, we have a good turnout. Much better than usually during the day. This is fantastic. All right, so Gregg, my friend. Let's talk about you in comics, first of all. Let's talk about when you discovered your very first comic book. At what age was it, and what was it?
I was in sixth, seventh grade, and it was the Punisher miniseries. And the Punisher was like the end-all be-all for me. I just was smitten. I remember I bought, when it went to the Unlimited series, I bought like, 10 copies because it was going to pay for my college education. Like they were going to be worth $1 kajillion. But I bought everything Punisher. It's weird. I was inclined more Marvel early days. I loved the Hulk. I loved Spider-Man. I loved Daredevil. But I collected all the Punisher appearances and everything. Like that was my fanatical, like, Spider-Man 129, the Captain America, and then the Wolverine limited series. I was also...
With Frank Miller. So you're talking about the Mike Zeck Punisher miniseries?
Exactly. And I just loved it. And obviously for me, I wanted to be a writer from as long as I can remember. Like I've illustrated, I have some of my books behind me. Hang on, let me see if we can tilt. Those are all my books in different languages and whatnot. But I have an illustrated mystery I wrote in 4th grade. So all I wanted to do is be a writer my whole life. My illustration level is not quite to your caliber. It's sort of like stick figures with smiley faces, but nonetheless, I was on that heading. And so for me, it was, there was something in the Punisher that just spoke to my bones.
What was it?
I think it's just the unapologetic anti-hero aspect. Like there's something for me that's the savagery of someone who's completely connected with their shadow and who's making all these horrible choices, but for good reasons, it's unbelievably compelling to me. Carl Jung said that the power of any person comes in their capacity to commit evil, right? And a lot of us, you can see people who have more powerful or charismatic personalities often have an edge that they can deploy at different times, but choose not to. And I've always been really drawn to characters, and vigilante justice has always been a theme. It's a huge comic book influence of mine. But I've been drawn to characters who act on it in ways that are more controlled, where it's, to catch monsters, you need to become a monster. That's always been so compelling. And what's interesting is a lot of my books, the novels, have dealt, and actually my movie that came out, The Book of Henry, came out a few months ago. So many of my projects deal with vigilantism. It's so interesting. And it kind of came full circle when I got a call from Axel Alonso, and he'd read some of the books that deal with vigilante justice and was sort of like, okay, like let's pick a character out of the Marvel vaults and just see what you can do with it. And it was like my inner geek boys doing cartwheels of delight, and I had to act very buttoned down and professional. But I really owe Axel. He's the guy who broke me in. And the second thing I did for him was Garth Ennis's run on the Punisher was when I realized what you could do as a writer with these characters. And I did the first arc after Garth left the series. And so it was this totally surreal moment where I could no longer go to my local comic book store and buy my favorite comic because I was writing it and already knew what happened in it, which, you're more used to. But for me, it was amazing.
Yeah. Punisher. So let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about your teenage years. I don't want to just skip from your childhood straight to when you broke in. So were you reading comics all through your teens, or were you kind of more into, because I think most people know you for your crime fiction. You're more of a novelist than a comic book writer. You're a novelist who's dabbled in comics. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote comics. I had a good 6-7 years of writing, you know, about 18 comics a year. So I'd say it was a lane. I mean, I do novels, I do TV, I do feature films, you know, screenplays, and I do comics. But I had an amazing 2-year run on Batman, which we'll get to. And after that, I haven't returned to comics because I felt like, you know, I went from Finch to you to Malieve, and then Neil Adams illustrated my Tech 27 short story that kind of does the whole, you know, it was a story about Batman because a lot of us wrote for the commemorative edition. And it started where it was like a golden age Batman who finds himself in the silver age, who turns into the bronze age, and Neil Adams illustrated in all those styles. Con was a guest of honor, and Howard Chaykin interviewed me. And I sort of felt like it was like a perfect note. The books were getting incredibly busier. You know, I sold 2 YA books. I started the Orphan X series. And I had a movie going into production, and I had a bunch of TV stuff happening. And I thought it was a perfect moment to kind of take a break from comics because I was just, everything else was getting insanely busy. But I had the most idyllic, I've had the most lovely experience working for Marvel and DC of anyone who I've ever met.
That's wonderful.
It was just seamless. I worked with the world's greatest artists, and I was treated with unbelievable respect. I only worked with Axel Alonso and Mike Martz. Those are the only 2 editors I ever dealt with.
So was there a connection there? Was it because Mike Martz, did Mike Martz know you from Marvel, or how did you make that connection from Alonso to Mike Martz?
He knew my work, but Axel broke me in and was all the way through. I mean, I did some Wolverine, I did some Moon Knight, you know, I did a year and change on Moon Knight. And then DC kind of came in to steal me away. And do you know this story about how, it's a really funny story. So I went to breakfast with Dan DiDio, and he said, you know, would you want to write if you came over to us? And I said, what I've always wanted to write is a Penguin limited series. And he looked at me like I was insane. It's like real, like Superman, Green Lantern, Bat. Not that he would have given me anything, but like, you know, and asked him what he wanted. And I've always felt that the Penguin is the most interesting of the Rogues Gallery because he's the only one who's sane. And I always wanted to make him more. The
Penguin is sane? You think the Penguin's sane with all his bird nonsense? And
yeah, I mean, I think he's a psychopath. But like, if you put him next to the Joker or the Riddler, like he's very strategic and considered. You know, if I think all of the Rogues Gallery are perfectly matched to be opposition to certain aspects of Batman. And I thought the Penguin never got his Killing Joke. Right? He never had the definitive origin story that made him real and concrete and menacing. I mean, I love the Killing Joke. And so I wanted to write that. And Dan was kind of like, okay. And whatever. So I still remember there was an online poll when I went to DC, and it was like right when the New 52 was kind of starting, and they named like 10 different upcoming series, and people could vote on which one was their favorite or which one they were looking forward to. And I still remember this. I got 0.0012% of the vote. The greatest all-time comment is somebody wrote as the comment, "I'm really glad Hurwitz's mom voted."
Oh my God! People were not excited about the Penguin. They weren't feeling it yet.
And that's one of those things where one of the things I love so much with the comic community is, like, critics came around, fans showed up for it. Like, it got this amazing response for being the least anticipated comic book limited series in history. And so then after that, you know, they called me up and they said, look, this was a success that was certainly bigger than they'd anticipated. And they said, we'd love you on a monthly. And I said, at the time, I said, the only way I would do a monthly is if it was Batman and if it was David Finch. And they're like, well, funny you would say that. Because, you know, Finch we just was on The Dark Knight. He was pulling double duty writing and illustrating. He just wanted to illustrate. Finch had done one of my alternate covers for Moon Knight. And I loved it. It's one of my favorite covers that I had done. And so I went over and I did what I did for the Penguin with the Scarecrow with him. And then so I love the villains in the Rogues Gallery, and we kind of redid that. And then this is the part I think that you don't know, which is I pursued you like a smitten schoolgirl because
Why?
because I loved your work, and Finch was moving on. It was his book, and it was going to be his book as long as he wanted to do it. But he was moving on to another project, and they said, "Who do you want for an artist?" I don't even know if you and I ever talked about this. And
we didn't talk about it, but I thought you were just being nice.
I'm never just nice. Don't worry. That's never. You never have to worry about that. So I literally was like the high detail work, the capability with panels fitting in a page, which I think you're better at than anyone who I've ever seen in comics. And I still remember even more than I thought, because you were like, man, you can push me. I can do 12 panels in a page if they're small. I mean, the detail work, I thought moving from Finch, the high detail work, to your style of high detail work was a really nice transition for the book. And so I went after you and was like, hey, why don't we do the same thing but for the Mad Hatter? Like I wanted to reinvent, do the new 52 Mad Hatter like I'd done the Scarecrow and like I'd done a version of for the Penguin. And I remember you were less than delighted that it was the Mad Hatter, but I was
delighted to work with you and delighted to work on Batman. But when you hear that your first big Batman arc is going to be about Mad Hatter,
yeah,
you can't help but be a little disappointed.
I know, but I gotta say, like the way you reinvented and reinterpreted him, like I'm really proud of that arc. I mean, I think there's some cool stuff we did in there. So.
Well, I did the first 3 issues as commentary tracks already, and clearly I'm proud of it too. The funny thing about books like that is, I kind of divorce myself from my own work as soon as it's published. Like I'll look it over and say, I'm too close to it. But then when you go back and look at it again, 4, 5, 6 years later, you have a much different, a much cleaner and objective view of it. And I went back and looked at those books, and they're really good. We did a good job. We did a good job together. Those books are great.
We crushed it. I mean, I have, there's pages in that I love. And you gave me that bad boy. That's the big spread from, I think, the first book, which I love, which I have hanging in my hallway usually, but I pulled it out here. I have one from you and one from Finch, and then I have my comic book rack like you have in your background with all the comics.
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about this issue with you. This is the last issue of our run with the Mad Hatter. But before we do that, I want to talk about something else of note. Now, as some of my viewers know, and I just did a video about this last night, I'm illustrating Jordan Peterson's new book. It's called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And it comes up this January. And I have been a fan of Jordan Peterson forever. I mean, like everyone, but I never knew him. We had a mutual friend, me and Dr. Peterson, and that friend was you.
Yeah. So, so Jordan and I go back forever. It's funny because there's a couple things that happen in my novels. My new novel series is called Orphan X, and everyone asks about you because the nemesis in the series is Charles Van Sciver. And I emailed you and said, you have the best name for a nemesis imaginable. And can I use your last name, which I think you remember. And the other thing that happens, so Charles Van Sciver is a huge character. And there's also there's a lot of allusions to other stuff. Like there's a scene in which Axel Alonso and Mike Martz get beat silly by my protagonist, Orphan X. I mean, so there's a lot of kind of comic booky stuff in it. But the other thing that appears in that is this book by Jordan Peterson, because I've been aware that Jordan's writing it I've been aware of it shaping up for probably 3-4 years now. So you're in it and Jordan's in it, though the book isn't even out yet. But one of my characters in the Orphan X series reads his book and uses it as a guideline to raise her son. She's a single mom. And so you both have this life that exists together already in the Orphan X series. So Jordan was my thesis advisor when I was an undergrad. He taught me personality psychology. And I did a Jung seminar with him, and he was my thesis advisor. So we were very, very close when I was an undergrad, and we've stayed close all the way through. And when I met my wife, we asked him to get ordained, and he married us. And so Jordan's been a huge part of my life. when his book was coming around and he was dealing with the question of illustrations, I thought you guys would just be the perfect match. I mean, I know, I've overlapped with both you guys a lot, and I just thought it was like a match made in heaven. And so I put you guys together, and I love how you're both interesting, disruptive thinkers who are unafraid of, free speech and are unafraid to have friends, like me with different viewpoints. Like I'd say more than half of my friends come from different positions. There's a lot we agree on. There's some stuff we don't agree on, but everyone's very open about it. And that's how I learn and exist in the world and update what I think and what I want to do and how I think about stuff. Like, to me, that's the biggest value. And, with Jordan, and he's been so thoughtful. He's had such an amazing impact on my life that, I just thought it'd be a great match to get you guys together. And I think it's going to be cool. I can't wait to see what you do with it.
It's already done. He showed off a galley. Is it called a galley copy? Is that what the,
yeah.
Okay,
oh, you got a galley already?
Yeah. He did a video of it last night and was going through it. I was like, wow, like it looks perfect. It looks exactly like what I hoped it would look like, the way they laid the illustrations in. And I'm super, super excited for it. And yeah, I mean, he was, wow, what a pleasure to talk to him, because listen, when you have a man like that on the phone, you don't want to take too much of his time. But I did want to avail myself of some of his wisdom and some of his personal life coaching and advice, and I did that. And boy, it was wonderful. I mean, I won't forget some of the things that he said to me. And isn't that, I mean, what you were saying earlier, isn't that just the way to live right now? And this is dying out. The idea of having friends around you who may be radicals in some way. I mean, I was just saying this on my Twitter, a lot of my friends are controversial, not because they agree with me, but often because they completely disagree with me. And I love them for that. I want to be surrounded by very special, very unique people who believe all different kinds of things. And I'm afraid that what's going on now in the world is that people are tending to get such thin skin that they can only be around people who agree with them about everything. And I've had people come to me and say, how can you be friends with this person who believes this, this, and this? How can you still maintain that friendship? And I say, I don't need friends to line up perfectly with every one of my viewpoints. After all, I'm still friends with you, person who's questioning me about my friends. I forgive you for that, just the way I forgive him for that. It's like I want friends who...
It's almost like beyond even forgiving. It's almost like, for me, it's an asset. It's like I already know what I think. Do you know what I mean? It's incredibly important for me to have friends who are, and we're talking obviously within parameters. I'm not going to be friends with someone who's a Nazi. I'm not going to be friends with people who are overtly devoted to hate and destruction.
To hurt other people. I mean, that's the line for me. I mean,
people have a different approach, and it's funny because anytime I do some peripheral political work, and anytime there's a notion that I have or something, the first thing I do is I run it through a gamut of people. I send it to a buddy of mine who's a devout libertarian, a buddy of mine who's a hardcore conservative Republican. I send it to friends who are more liberal. I want everything attacked from every side. And I feel like we have this increasing polarization. And part of that is there's so many wonderful benefits of social media. Like, people have access to you to talk about comic books, and there's this wonderful sense of community for people who might not find people who are like them. There's a lot that's beneficial. One of the detriments is at a moment everyone can unlike everybody who disagrees with them and exist in their own little positive feedback loop where moral indignation and outrage get little dopamine hits of everybody liking and agreeing with them. And I think that's what's moving people in a more and more polarized direction. And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it certainly in politics. We're seeing it in film reviewing, that movies have to either be the greatest movie ever or the worst thing that they've ever seen, because that's what garners more clicks and gets more attention. And so there's this real tendency, and it's funny because I have such a range of friends with different viewpoints, and it is my favorite thing about my group of friends. Just as a quick story that you'll get a kick out of. So I just lost a friend of mine he was in his 70s, who was a hardcore armorer, early spec ops guy, one of the preeminent snipers and armorers and suppliers to the Black Ops community in the world. The guy is a spectacular, amazing guy, and he lived in Vegas. In fact, I based the character on him in the Orphan X books. His last name was Stojak, which is like your last name, an unimprovable last name.
Yeah.
So I changed the first name as I did with you. And I could never use his name until he passed away. So now I can finally thank him publicly. But I was at his memorial last week in Vegas, and I was telling the story. I mean, I'd go out there, I'd shoot every gun that I wrote about in the books to make sure I had it right. I'm not a huge gun guy.
We went shooting.
Yeah, that's right. We went shooting. And, you know, I'm not like a hardcore gun guy, but if you're writing about guns, you better know how they work and what they do. So, but I could do anything with him. We'd shoot rocket propelled grenades. I mean, he had access to everything. He was amazing. And so I was giving a talk at his memorial, and everybody was talking in Vegas about how in Nevada they enjoy freedoms that aren't allowed in California, you know, because the gun laws. And it was this really funny thing. So I got up and I'm like, okay, like I'm the California asshole everyone's been referring to. And but I told the story about the first time I went out to my boy's ranch, Billy's ranch. We pull up, and in his front yard is literally a mini tank with a Trump Pence sign on it. And this was like the week after the election. And we're out there like looking at all this weaponry, and my phone is blowing up with all my friends and family who are all at the Million Women March. And so everyone's sending me all these pictures, and I'm there with Billy. And then the funniest thing that happened is at one point, some people came across Miley Cyrus. So I'm getting these pictures with Miley Cyrus, like in protest. And Billy looks over at me and goes, "What's that?" And I was like, "Nothing." No, but I showed it to him. And it was really funny. But it was so symbolic of like the being in the mix in a real way. You remember clearly how high sentiments were after the election. And it was this really interesting thing of being in this one community with another community, and everything's interacting. And I simply don't have I won't draw a line on who I'll be friends with based on their politics unless they are, you know, cross a certain line.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely. Well, okay, so excellent. Let's talk about this now. Let's get into this one particular comic book, Greg.
Great.
Let's talk about this thing that you've got the whole trade. That's got everything in it. This is the last book of the. Am I getting echoey here? I don't know. This is the last book of the 6-issue run. Now, I was able to do the first 3 with you.
Yeah.
Are you? I'm hearing myself. I'm hearing feedback, which is strange. But I missed 2 issues in the middle, and then came back to the last one. And I'm glad I did because this was a great ending to the story. I mean, this was so fun, just so fun. So Mad Hatter has basically lost his mind at this point, and he's. Oh, look, no, here it is. This is the thing that's on your desk right now. This is from the very.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. Greg likes to ask.
Yeah, right. That was the spread for our last one. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So Greg likes to have people put the title of the story into the artwork itself, which other guys don't. I don't think I've ever worked with a writer who asked for that to happen. So he would say the title of the story is Mad. And did you actually ask me to work it into the wing like that, his cape? You must have.
I suggested it. There's a lot of places where I made suggestions and then you improve them. I mean, I always think it's like, you know, the script is sort of a invitation to collaborate. And so I give more direction, but there were so many times you came back, like the piano key conversation that you spoke about, like that was all you. I just said, here's a bunch of the panels. And so I can't remember if this was one of your innovations, but you made plenty of innovations that were improvements on what were recommended.
People saw this, and I remember seeing people, they didn't realize this was the title of the story. They thought I'd hidden a message in there.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, I'm known for that, and it's like, I don't really do that very often, guys. I did it, I've done it before, but this would have been very, very blatant. So this is not a hidden message. This is the title of the last issue of the Mad Hatter story arc, and great colors by it's Hi-Fi, Brian Miller in them.
Hi-Fi, yeah, they crushed it.
Yeah, they were coloring everything.
And I think of this arc because obviously the Mad Hatter with the Mad theme. The first issues were all like coiling a spring, and this is when it just explodes.
That's a great way to think about it. And by the way, you wrote this very rapidly, didn't you? The whole story?
Yeah, I always write. I write in like big manic blasts. I do the whole arc at once. And so I think I wrote this whole arc over like a week and a half or 2 week period because I just want the whole. Maybe that's from coming from novels.
Mm-hmm.
But if I haven't written that far in advance, what happens is I get to issue 6 and I'm like, wait a minute, I can drop a handkerchief in issue 3 then, or I can go back. You know, it gives me a lot of room to improve on than if I'm writing it, 5 months after I wrote the first one. And so there's a lot of tweaking and there's a lot of emphasis. And I remember we would do these calls that were like what the director call is when you're producing a TV show. You get the director on the phone and you walk through the script because they're doing other stuff to say, make sure you highlight this point or something. And you and I had a lot of conversations that way we'd figure out what to pop because you'd already know what was coming in issue 5 or 6.
Well, I mean, job number 1 for me, once I got your script, was just designing our Mad Hatter because I wasn't sure what he looked like. I wasn't sure if I liked the character yet. But I mean, reading your story and going back to his childhood, which was full of a lot of surprising beats where he wasn't the nerd, the loser as a little kid that you would think the cliched kind of villain backstory would be. He actually had good friends, and he just didn't grow up with them. He just kind of stalled in his development and tried an experimental drug, which kind of drove him a little bit nutty. But I mean, that was fascinating. That made me like him a lot. That made me feel differently about him than I knew that I did. And the idea that he really wanted to be just taller. I mean, he just wanted to be taller. That's all.
Yeah, he wanted to fit in. It's such a motif.
Yeah.
And I had that moment where, like, the girl, of course, Alice, who he was in love with, was outgrowing him. He wasn't growing. And there's an experimental pill, but it might lead to psychosis. And they put it in front of him, like the choice is his. And they say, of course, this one makes you bigger. I wanted to keep referring back to it. And there's that whole run of panels that he has it before him on the desk, and he's just thinking if he's going to take it. And the last one, he takes it. Yeah. And of course, that costs him everything.
Oh, I'm sure it does. It's so sad, but I think at heart he's a good guy. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I'm thinking back. He's not a very good guy. He's just shooting people randomly. This is one of my favorite pages that I've ever done of Batman. I have to say, I was like, hey, I've been gone for 2 issues. I'm going to impress Gregg Hurwitz. I'm going to come back strong. Yeah. And I love the panel. This is a great panel of like him spreading out his cape. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do differently with Batman's cape was to obviously make it look like bat wings. And so this was a good opportunity that you gave me, him diving into this this hole in the ground, this secret fortress, this like almost buried island.
The hero's descent right here. Like he finally yields to his rage.
Yeah.
Because Natalia is killed and
Well, basically, he proposes to Natalia, the pianist, and then she gets killed. So that's a reason to be angry, I would think. Hence the title. And then he goes into, look at this. All right, this is all Wonderland stuff. Look, he said he would do this. By the way, this in issue number 1, when he actually confronts Tweedledee and just tells him if he doesn't get on the right side of the law, he's going to mess him up even worse than he was messed up the first time. Tweedledee goes through this litany of problems, medical problems that he's been suffering since the last time Batman beat him up. And for a moment, you have this beat where like Batman is sorry. Is he sorry?
So I had a friend who was at a wedding in New Orleans, and some weird guy turned around for no reason and punched him on the dance floor, and it literally like dislocated his whole skull. And I based this injury on that story because we always see Batman swings in and kicks a guy with his boots, and now and then you have occasion in your life to come up against like how insane damage is from violence. Like if a grown man punches somebody in the face, it's horrific. And that's something I try to get to in the Orphan X books too. And I just thought that Batman, I always have a thing, and I started this with the Penguin, because if you're the Penguin, Batman's the villain, Batman's a big, handsome, square-jawed bully, like all the other people who have bullied him. And I always want to say, you know, and that's that sort of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead thing where you shift the perspective to another character. And so here we have Tweedledum saying, look, you know, you swung through a window and kicked me, and you do that all the time. Here's what that did to my skull. You know, my upper palate was detached and floating. You shattered both of the orbital sockets. Like, he goes through what it is. And I like to pause sometimes, and you know, it gives Batman a moment of pause to really think about the level of pain he's inflicting on people.
And for a moment he does, but the stakes are such that he just says, I'll do it to you again. I'll do it to you again. I love that. That was such a great moment. You're so good, Greg. Come back.
Well, it gets really bad in a few pages. How he does it again. I mean, this is like, so this is the nicer one, but of course we got this coming up.
Oh God. Oh. All right, let's fast forward. This is all the psychedelia you let me draw. I mean,
yeah, which was amazing.
It's so fun.
And you did that on you did that on a cover. One of our covers is amazing with that. The stoned out like psychedelic mushroom Batman, which is amazing. But no, there's a lot of fun playing with the surreal nature of this, and Batman having to fight, you know, his own inner demons. And of course, we go back to the movie theater with his parents, and all the villains show up here, and you got to do your sort of, you know, show. Yeah, there you go, showing off all the guys.
I was jealous of the Scarecrow.
Yeah, I know. Well, Man-Bat, and you remember, you said, I mean, not to detour too much, but you were dying always to do a Man-Bat, and I wasn't that familiar with Man-Bat, and that was your ask of me after this. And you said, I want to do Man-Bat, and we did it Marvel style. Do you remember? I wrote it like a film script, because we said, let's just do it that way. I'm not going to tell you any of the panels. I'll tell you how many pages. I'll put action and dialogue, and you literally directed, designed, and laid out the whole thing. I didn't make one panel suggestion for the 2-issue Man-Bat story. It was really fun.
Do it again.
All right.
Why won't you gotta come back to comics? I'm sick of this.
All right.
You gotta come back.
You tell me a cool project that I can slide into. I'll give you we'll do the Marvel version. I'll write you a script, and then off we'll go.
All right, let's think about it right now. At DC, what would I have Gregg Hurwitz do right at this moment? Oh, you know what I would actually do with you? I would do Robin. I mean, I'm putting that out there because it's just like it's something that I wouldn't expect. Just the same way I wouldn't expect you to want to do Penguin. I wonder if you would write a Robin story. Talk about a crime victim as a young kid, raised by Batman.
Super, yeah, I do the super dark version. Robin's a little sunny. If you look at who I play with the Punisher, Wolverine, Batman, so it would be a very dark version of it.
Yeah, I don't think Robin's sunny at all. I think Robin is the opposite of sunny. I think the old version of Robin that we saw, you know, in the TV show and everything was silly. But I mean, really, to have your parents, first of all, you're trained in the circus, and then have your parents fall to their deaths in front of you, perhaps some intentional sabotage, and then be raised by this lunatic in a cave to fight crime. There's nothing cute about it. I mean, it's a pretty scary story.
All right, let's talk. We'll break it down. I'm in. What do you want to do?
I don't know. We'll figure it out after this, definitely. But let's wrap this up.
Let's get back to the comics. Yeah, so that's what happened, because he says to him, "You damaged my face. My jaw's hanging on with screws." And Batman has a moment where he's upset and empathetic, and then he says, "Don't make me come back."
And he comes
back.
He
comes back.
Ugh, I had
to bad.
Ugh, so violent, it's evil as hell. And then here's the moment where, like, again, it's like just screaming at this. You know, I just saw Batman as this ghost of all of, you know, Mad Hatter's failures, and just he wishes all the things he wished he could be. Look how tall he is and spooky, and he's smiling at him. He's laughing at him.
It's so interesting to me that the two biggest things with Batman I kept in mind is that, you know, Batman exists on that balance between perfection and intimacy. And like the thing I love the most is he's, you know, there's no magic ring. He can't fly. He's just the pinnacle of what can be achieved through discipline. only because he has no intimacy in his life. Like everyone dies, he's all alone. If you don't have people confusing your life and kids and spouses and parents, you can be fully devoted to yourself. But intimacy is messy and it kind of lowers, it lowers your ability to exist with perfection. And that to me is like one of the seminal balances of Batman. But because of that lack of intimacy, there's an aspect to him that I never shied away from, which is Batman as a sort of bully. And that's what I talked about with the Penguin. That's what you talked about in that earlier exchange with Tweedledee or Tweedledum. And this height differential is beautiful, you know, that you got going. And there was so much of that I played with the Penguin, of just, you know, his perspective looking up at this towering, you know, pinnacle of humanity. You really nailed it visually.
I forgot about this. Like, I forgot what you made me do here. I'm looking at these pages and like they hurt. And I remember they hurt at the time because I'd come to sort of, even though he was doing bad things, I'd come to feel sorry for the Mad Hatter. I'd come to really care about Jervis, and I knew he was due a beating. I didn't know it was going to be this severe. To knock his 2 front teeth out, his little buck teeth, and then to beat him so mercilessly to the point where, like, this is what we're left with. I mean, that's pretty realistic.
Well, that's why we had to kill, you know, it had to be a personal mission of vengeance, you know, to get us to the point where we feel some kind of cathartic release. 2 art things I want to point to. First of all, you're insanely wacky. The horse with the boxing gloves is crazy, from the mind of Ethan Van Maniac right there. And then is that like a dodo bird slipping into the routine?
That's the dodo bird. They're all from Alice in Wonderland. That's the box.
Yeah, I know. But the way you integrated that into that's amazing. And the other thing is, and this isn't even one of your fuller pages, but there's 9 panels on that page.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing I got to say that I love as a writer is there's nothing better than an artist who can give you that much story room and that much narrative and that many panels on a page. And I've literally never worked with anyone who does that as well as you. You've done panels for me on pages. I think you did one that was like 12 or 13 panels. Obviously, they can't be incredibly complex, but to be able to have that much room for story engine is such an enormous benefit.
It's all movement. It's got to be movement. When you do a page, I used to tell Jeff Johns when we were doing Flash Rebirth, I said, I'll do a 100 panel page with the Flash running, just because all of those panels together suggest quick beats, staccato beats.
Yeah.
And you could really get the sense of Flash running fast if we did something insane like that. And this is actually a 10 panel page, not 9 panels, but there's so much violence and movement that, you know, it works. So, you know, when we work together again, the violence, the action, the violence, the blood, the excitement can be done on those like gigantic multi-panel pages.
Exactly. And then I always wanted you to be able to stretch your, you know, throw your elbows a little. So we did, you know, a good number like that where you have a wider tapestry, you know, so it's all about doing both. But that's the rarest thing. And I'm sure there's a ton of comic book artists watching and following. And I would say, from a writer's perspective, that is what I have found to be the most valuable and useful aspect, is if you can fit a number of panels and advance the story in sort of complex and interesting format and hold the narrative structure for that, it's an enormous benefit for the writer. And that's something with you, I felt like you could do anything I asked of you on that front.
Hey, Greg, listen,
that was amazing.
Okay, so you love the Penguin. What if, now you want to talk about like Batman, Bruce Wayne being kind of a father figure to Robin, who's named after a bird character, coincidentally. What would happen if Penguin tried to become a different kind of father figure to Robin and actually take him in a little, try to take Robin in some way?
That's interesting.
You want to do another Penguin story?
Yeah, the Dark Father. And if you love Scarecrow, I could get him in there too. You've always wanted to do more Scarecrow.
I love Scarecrow. He's just a bag of bones. I love him. I love him.
my first panel on the Scarecrow thing with Finch is him humming to himself as he's actually stitching his lips shut with the straw. I wanted to do it literally for the New 52.
Yeah.
So he's like in the mirror. I wanted to be this like Silence of the Lambs beat.
All of your covers are really, really good. You made Finch do these great Scarecrow covers that became T-shirts. They were so good. So,
Yeah,
so Batman actually beats Mad Hatter one last time, just an uppercut. This is merciless. I really have a hard time looking at this, and knocks him into this pool of water, and he's gonna leave him to die. And Alfred talks him out of it. Look at this, and he goes and makes the decision to save him.
This is one of my favorite pages. I remember I told you you had to send this to me, but you never got around to it. So I'm putting that in the resentment bank, which I've held forever. This is one of my favorite pages in any of my comic book work. It's gorgeous, and I've referenced it a ton. I wrote a pilot that David Goyer was going to direct.
Really?
Based on Stephen King's The Dark Half. Yeah, this was a few years ago. We had a beat that was very similar to this exact beat. Like this page has become a reference point for me. And of course, because Goyer's Goyer, he has all that shorthand with comics, you know, like because he's amazing. And so I brought this in and showed him this and how it blocked out and stuff. This page to me is it's the whole thing, man. I love this page.
You are way too kind. Thank you so much. And then we have Batman returning home covered in blood, and he says, "Don't worry, it's not my." Greg, you're killing me. You are killing me with this. Because here's the thing, I forgive Jervis. I forgive him. You know what it is. Here's the problem. The problem is I didn't draw the death of Natalia. That's the thing. If I had drawn that, that would have been different. I wasn't there for that, so I only witnessed his crimes up to the third issue. You get emotional about this stuff. You care about these characters. Do you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you got to feel it. You got to hurt when you're writing it a little bit. I can always tell if something's real writing if I'm feeling emotion when I'm doing it. You know, if I'm bored writing it, you're going to be bored reading it. And so it's always like if it's eliciting emotion in me as it's going, that's a good sign.
I think it works on readers too. I hope it does. I think you succeed if you can transpose that to them as well. Because I'm flipping through this with you, and I'm feeling it again. And I've only had this kind of experience once before, and that was on New X-Men 117, where Grant Morrison had a young mutant beat up Hank McCoy with his own baseball bat, and that he meant to give him as a gift, and he was being psychically instructed to do it against his will, and that really hurt my feelings. It was hard to read. This was just very hard for me to draw because Mad Hatter was such a cipher to me. I feel like I took the best elements of the classic idea of Mad Hatter and then created this little character around them that was uniquely ours, and to hurt him really hurt me.
The eye is amazing.
It's just lame.
It's funny though. I mean, the other thing that's important to note is that, I wrote the whole arc for you. It's like I write differently for different artists. And so it's very interesting because we had some substitute art by an amazing artist, Simon Kudransky, who did my Penguins, who's incredible. Like he's one of my favorite artists. But I probably would have written some of the stuff a little bit differently. Like it's another thing as a writer for people out there who are writers or aspiring writers. You also tailor your stuff to really show off the artists who you have. I felt like, and so it's very different style. And the end of the graphic novel has a long short story, the annual that I wrote for Zyman specifically, and I wrote and broke that apart very differently for him than I would for you. So there's a lot of differences where there's so much with you that specifically I want to show off. When I'm working on a Ethan Van Sciver book. And so that's also an interesting thing of how you coax the best out of your collaboration so that, you're making me look better and smarter and like a greater writer. Like I want you to just make me look better than I am. That's part of what you want in a relationship for collaboration.
But you can't do a great comic without a great script, and you can't get a great script out of a bad writer. You are a marvelous writer. And I thoroughly enjoyed drawing these books with you. And I mean it when I say I know you're busy, you're doing a lot of things, but I think comic book fans as well as myself, would love you to come back and write something new when you've got it in your heart, when you're ready to do it and you have time. And please think about me, because I would love to draw it.
Absolutely. we'll noodle on that.
Beautiful. Gregg Hurwitz, thank you so much for joining us on Comic Artist Pro Secrets. This was an absolute honor and a pleasure. Thank you for everything that you've done for me in my career. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. And it's great to have you on my channel.
All right, pal. Great to see you. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.